Hi guys! Today we're going to make 4 different versions of a Christmas tree. We're going to use crayons, colored pencils, Crayola watercolors, and then I'll show you how I make them with professional watercolors. I hope you have fun with this project. Let's go! Remember how you used to draw a Christmas tree by starting out with a little triangle and then drawing some other triangles underneath it? We're going to change that. Now we're going to make it a little bit curvy, and we're going to give it a little bit of form and depth by adding some shading and some different colors. Instead of flat shapes stacked on top of each other like the old way, we're going to make each tier or layer of the tree look like it's sitting over the layer underneath it. You'll see what I mean, but let's practice here. We're drawing curvy lines that kind of swoop out to the side. They're not the same length, and then the bottom of each tier is another curvy line. So just take your time. You can rewind this part and practice it over and over till you get the feel of what we're doing. Don't worry about your trees looking exactly like my trees either, because the more of these you draw, each one is going to look different. I start out by shading in crayon with a soft or light green color, and then I'll take a little bit darker or brighter green color and color just underneath the edge of each tier. Then the little shapes that go out to the side, I colored an even darker green color to make them look like they're underneath. I colored the trunk brown and the star yellow. Now we're going to do it with a Sharpie marker and colored pencil, just the same way we did with crayon. And you can see that even my tree is looking a little goofier than my first design did. So don't get too hung up on it being perfect or exact, just have fun with it. I'm using the same coloring scheme I did with crayon, using light color on top and darker colors underneath. I shade the trunk area, and here I'm giving a little bit extra depth to some of the underneath layers. Now let's try watercolors. These are regular Crayola watercolors that you can buy at Walmart or Target and even some grocery stores. They're not very expensive, and it's a great starter set. First I do my outline of my tree, then I use a squirt bottle to add water to the colors in my watercolor tray. For a more in-depth look at how I do this, please see my previous video about the Thanksgiving project. I'll put a link in the upper right hand corner of this video so you can watch that one too. Next I get started on the painting. I fill in areas of color that are far away from each other so that the wet paint doesn't touch. I got a little outside the line there, so all you have to do is clean off your brush and maybe take a tissue or something and wipe up the extra. You want to let these 2 layers dry, and then you can go into the middle area. Depending on your painting, you can paint areas of wet paint next to each other, but if you want it to dry in a particular way, you kind of want to leave areas dry before painting right next to it. The areas on the underneath side of the tier, I'm painting a yellowish green to make it look kind of like they're lit from underneath. It just gives it a lighter touch. this is what it looks like when I'm working with my artist grade materials. The paper you can see is textured. It is called cold press watercolor paper, and the pound weight is 140 pounds. The paint I'm using here is a Winsor & Newton travel kit. I've had it for years and I love it. I also use some other brands. I'm not sponsored, it's not a commercial, that's just what I use. The paintbrush that I'm using is a number 6 round watercolor brush, and it is so old that it's falling apart. I don't even know the brand name of it because it's worn off. I let the first 2 areas dry before I come in and paint this center section. I like filling in the color in the middle of the area in which I'm working and then going around and refining the edges. Especially when you're working on a small scale, this helps keep your edges nice and crisp, and you don't mess up the edges when you have to go into the middle and fill in all the color. The technique that I'm using here is called wet on dry, which means my brush is fully loaded with paint, it's very wet, and the paper is dry. Sometimes in watercolor, you wet your paper before you even put any paint on it, and that's called wet on wet. In this case, I'm leaving the paper dry until I paint on it with a very wet brush, and that's why it's called wet on dry. So now I have my sheet of 6 little mini paintings. Each one is 4 inches by 4 inches, and I'm gonna let that dry. So let's take a look and see what everybody else is doing. Thank goodness the pets are sleeping so I can get back to work. So the first couple of trees, I painted the under part of the tier a darker color to make it appear shaded. But then I wanted to lighten it up a little bit, and I started painting them the yellowish green color. Even though it makes more sense for these areas to be shaded and therefore darker, I kind of like yellow-green. I like adding it in my work. It adds a really nice brightness, pop of color to a painting. And in this instance, it almost looks like there is light coming from inside the tree and shining on its inside layers. So, I don't know, I kind of like it. It breaks rules, but who cares? It's a fat little Christmas tree. To finish them up, I painted the trunks brown and painted a gold star on the top of each tree. I had a lot of fun with this project. I hope you guys have fun with it too. If you post your work online, tag me at HideHorch. I would love to see it. I'll put it in my stories. It just makes me so happy when other people have as much fun as I do making artwork. So, hope you guys have a great holiday, and I'll see you next year.